Recruitment companies tend to be guilty of a number of common mistakes when it comes to their online marketing. So I just want to run through what these common mistakes are and offer some potential remedies for them. So there are three things that I really want to focus on. First of all, are their tendency to have quite broad and consequently generic brand identities and a lack of real positioning in their market. The second is a lack of any kind of content strategy or content framework. And the third is an over-reliance on outbound, quite traditional sales techniques, as opposed to really bringing those opportunities towards them, or even better, becoming famous within a particular market so that everybody knows about them. So the first thing I want to touch on there is the issue of brand. Now, the recruitment market is an incredibly saturated space. There are so many companies. Some of them are completely generic, some of them focus on particular markets, but the one common theme is that they're all communicating very, very generic messaging. And the problem is that the more people you try and communicate to, and the more that you try and avoid alienating anyone in particular, the more watered down, the more diluted, the more meaningless your message ultimately becomes. So it's so important to begin with a clear framework for the brand. And I just want to run through a quick overview of what that framework might look like. So it all begins with what we call the brand purpose. I'm sure that's something that you will already be familiar with, but the sense of why it is that you exist. What is it that you believe is fundamentally wrong about that market from a recruitment perspective that you are trying to change? You might have heard of a concept called What's Your Why by a chap called Simon Sinek. If you've not heard of that, it's a very, very simple concept. He's done a number of very short but brilliant videos on the topic, so I'd highly recommend searching for that. So that's Simon Sinek, What's Your Why? Now, once you've got your brand purpose, then you can look at what we call the brand personality, because ultimately people buy from people far more readily than they buy from faceless organizations. So the ability to embody your brand as a personality will really enhance your ability to communicate on a more emotional level with your audience. And this is so important within an industry where people, they are going through, some emotions in that process. They might feel a bit insecure or a bit nervous about the jobs that they're applying for, or how to best prepare themselves. So your ability to kind of in an emotional sense, hold their hand through that journey and really reassure them is hugely, hugely important. But also as well, from the employer's perspective, they want to know on a personal level the kind of people that they are dealing with, the kind of company that they are engaging with. So your ability to really capture the personality of the brand is tremendously important. The next thing then is what we call organizational values. Obviously, there's nothing new about those, but so important. Ultimately, this is a service business. People, you are just the sum total of the people within your organization. So your ability to capture the values, the characteristics of your lead players, more often than not, the founders of that particular recruitment agency, your ability to capture what it was that brought about their early success, and then really embed that within the cultural DNA of the organization. And you need specific mechanisms for ensuring that this is achieved. But your ability to do that is going to be, I would say, from a brand perspective, maybe the single most important challenge that you face. The next thing from a brand point of view is the brand kind of visual identity. Now, this is the thing that most people will jump to first. When they think of brand, they think about logo and typeface and color palette. Actually, this is the thing that should come at the very end, because after all, how can you know how to communicate something visually until you're clear on what it is that you're actually trying to communicate in the first place? So once we have all of that, and there are other bits to it, there's the value proposition and credibility and other sort of brand elements, but there's a sort of quick overview. Once you have that, we can start to craft messaging on the website or on your brochures or on social media or whatever it might be that really hones in on those core themes. And this is what now takes us to the content strategy. So once we are clear on the priority audiences, both from an employer and an employee perspective, and the key industries that you want to focus on, and that's so important because your ability to laser in on different sectors is really going to enhance your ability to communicate effectively to that world. Once you're clear on this, we can start to create a framework with specific content pillars that we believe are going to resonate with that particular audience. So, for example, on the employee side, on the applicant side, they're going to be themes around, in a narrow sense, they're going to be themes around how to best prepare for interviews, how to create a great CV, etc. But we can go broader than that. We can start to say, well, actually, who are these people? What are their interests? And how can we engage with them on a more interesting level, on an emotional level? Because ultimately, if we want to maximize the top of the funnel and communicate with as many people as possible, simply churning out blog posts about 7 tips for writing a great CV, they're only going to take you so far. We have to be a little bit more creative than that. So it all comes down to understanding the audience and what really interests them. Likewise, in the employer side, if we can hone in on a particular sector, we can start to say what really matters to business decision makers within that particular world. And we can start to create themes. Maybe they're interested in topics around leadership or sales or marketing, but we can start to create really interesting content specific to that sector. Now, once we've done all of this, things like social media really take care of themselves because the content is all in place. The problem is that we tend to jump straight to social media without a clear sense of our brand and of our content strategy. The final thing I want to mention is this over-dependence on quite outdated, outbound and quite cold sales techniques. Ultimately, what any business should be striving for nowadays is to build a brand that is so well recognized within its particular space that the leads organically come in much more of an inbound way. So to give you some examples of that, obviously there is the social media, which we touched upon, and developing a real presence within that particular market, but there's also search engine optimization. And it's important to realize that all Google is trying to achieve is to create a world in which users can find the best content from the most trusted brands. So that should be your focus from a search engine point of view. Creating the most content, the most rich content, the most useful content, the most inspiring content for your particular audience, making sure that it's beautifully structured in the most intuitive fashion on your website, and then enabling the search engines to crawl that content, index it, and bring in those very, very targeted visitors. So I'm going to give you an example, a more specific example of where recruitment agencies so often will go wrong. Let's imagine that you have jobs for, I don't know, the technology sector within London, right? Now, what you would ideally have is a page with content that caters to as broad an array of user intents as possible. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of the person making that search query. So IT job in London. What are all those things going through their mind when they make that search query? Are they hoping to find job information? Well, of course they are. Are they hoping to find testimonials from people just like them, or as we touched on before, useful content around how to best prepare themselves, etc.? Are they hoping to see address information of where you're based so they know where to come for those kind of preliminary interviews? But what are the other things that might be helpful to them? Do they want to know how long the process is going to take and what they should expect throughout that process? Now, these things really it's kind of stating the obvious, but so few recruitment agencies will have a page that brings together all this rich, diverse, really useful information and present it in a very digestible manner and ensure that Google can crawl it all and it's all indexable within the search engines. Very few agencies will do that. But if you can do that, then immediately you have a landing page that's going to perform really, really well. It's going to bring in traffic while you sleep and ultimately move your business forward in a far more efficient way, far more effective way than some of those more traditional techniques could ever achieve.